David Perdue has announced he will run for governor and challenge the incumbent Brian Kemp in Georgia. Stacey Abrams essentially baited him into doing this. The Democrats knew exactly what they were doing. That's one of the most remarkable bits of this. I don't want to dwell nationally with this in the ways I would on just WSB in Atlanta. I actually did some special recording for them on this issue, but all of you need to know because this is a major national story. Donald Trump's team has convinced former Senator David Perdue to challenge the incumbent Republican governor of Georgia in a Republican primary. Poor old Vernon Jones. Vernon Snuggles Jones was a Democrat turned Republican. Went overnight from pro-abortion to pro-life and beclowned himself, announcing he was going to run against Brian Kemp, showed up at several Trump events and got head patted by Donald Trump. And now Trump is coming out with David Perdue after Vernon spent all that money littering the state of Georgia with his yard signs down the interstate. There is a small group of Republicans who feel aggrieved about Brian Kemp because they're not really Republicans, they're Trump supporters. Donald Trump lost, and of course he can never take the blame, nor can anyone blame him, so others must be blamed. So they will blame Brian Kemp, the governor of the state of Georgia, for Donald Trump's loss in Georgia, where 11,400 people more voted for Biden over him, and then another 33,000 people refused to vote at all in that election. This summer in Georgia, they had their annual Republican convention. David Perdue introduced Brian Kemp at the Republican convention and sang his praises. A month ago, reporters asked David Perdue about challenging Brian Kemp, the rumor he was going to run against Brian Kemp, and he said, Georgia already has a governor and I support him. Quote, didn't make that up. That's from David Perdue a month ago. Today, he's announcing he's running for governor, and he's released a video that blames Brian Kemp for the loss of 2 Senate seats in Georgia. Now, last I checked, David Perdue was one of those senators who lost, and apparently it wasn't his fault, it was Brian Kemp's fault. Now, for perspective here on what we're dealing with, David Perdue ran against Jon Ossoff, the most spectacularly unaccomplished millennial Democrat to ever run for office in the United States, more unaccomplished than Beto O'Rourke. Dude likes to dress up in Star Wars costumes. David Perdue not only wouldn't debate Jon Ossoff on a stage, but lost to Jon Ossoff. And now thinks he will have a better time against Stacey Abrams than the man who's already beaten her once. David Perdue could not beat Jon Ossoff and thinks he can beat Stacey Abrams, who's a far more accomplished and competent politician than Jon Ossoff. Good luck with that reasoning. But you know, you're arguing with the logic of the insane asylum. You're arguing with the logic of Mar-a-Lago. In the alternative reality that is Mar-a-Lago, good candidates are bad and bad candidates are good. Now, I say this as someone who likes David Perdue. He's a good, fine man. His wife's a wonderful person. I wish he were still in the U.S. Senate, but he has no business running against Brian Kemp. And the way he's running, if you listen to him, is he is running as a tool of Donald Trump's vendetta. He's not running as his own man, and that's also the problem. Why are you running in his announcement video? Why are you running? Because Brian Kemp lost us 2 Senate seats. No accepting his own responsibility for his own loss. It's all Brian Kemp. By the way, his loss was in a runoff where 427,205 Republicans refused to show up because, among other things, David Perdue's man, Donald Trump, and the chairman of the state party of Georgia, David Schaefer, and people like Marjorie Taylor Greene were telling them all it's going to be lost. It's going to be lost. They're going to steal it. That wasn't Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp was around the state telling everybody, hey, it's things are good. Things are good. We're Donald Trump didn't have the election stolen. And there are people circulating all sorts of crazy rumors. Like I just got an email from listener Greg. Can you address the meeting and the allegations of a payment between Brian Kemp, Brad Raffensperger, and Stacey Abrams during the 2020 election runoff? I'm a fan of Kemp, but others bring up this alleged meeting and payment, and I don't know how to respond. You respond by telling them they're crazy. You're asked to prove something in the negative, something that didn't happen. Apparently, the rumor is Brian Kemp was throwing money at Stacey Abrams. Oh my gosh. Listen, there are crazy people who believe crazy things. And just because they believe crazy things doesn't mean you have to entertain them. This is one of the things we're learning after 2020. On both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans believe a lot of lies, things that are not true, and are so committed to believing the lie when you tell them it's not true, they think you're in on it. There's nothing you can do with people who are in a cult like this. They need to be deprogrammed. And this is unfortunately where we are nationwide. Donald Trump is not interested in Republicans taking back Congress or beating back Democrats. He's interested in nursing grudges. The question Republicans are going to need to ask themselves moving forward are, do you want to win, or do you want to use yourself as a tool to avenge Donald Trump? Because if you wish to avenge Donald Trump by taking out all the reasonable Republicans who have won and beaten Democrats, you risk losing everything to settle scores. Is that what you want to do? For some, yes, that's exactly what they want to do. They're not Republican, and this is something Republicans have to understand and appreciate. There are a lot of people who are Trump voters who were never involved in politics before Donald Trump, and when he goes away, they will go away too. And you've got to find a way to build bridges in ways that can keep as many of them as possible without also setting yourself on fire with everyone else. Glenn Youngkin in Virginia was one of the candidates who was able to do that. He found issues that resonated. Education being a big one, crime being a big one. And a lot of Republicans are going to have those issues on which to run. David Perdue, in his announcement, unfortunately, wants to run as Donald Trump's avenging angel. For those of you who don't live in Georgia, let me just put this all in perspective for you. Brian Kemp reopened Georgia during the COVID lockdowns sooner than anyone, including Donald Trump, wanted. And Brian Kemp said it's not an all or nothing situation. You've got to balance the healthcare concerns from COVID with the economic concerns of everyday Georgians. And he thought he was doing a good job by building up supplies at hospitals and then reopening the states and letting the state manage the flow of infrastructure and supplies to hospitals so that no hospital came up short. Not a single person in Georgia, as a result, went without hospital care who needed it, even as the state opened back up. And in fact, until the George Floyd riots, COVID stayed down. And then the Memorial Day boaters and the George Floyd rioters in Georgia started spreading COVID again, and we got a summer high. That's the reality of the situation. But Kemp did his job well. He got the state economy going again. Of the top 10 states in the nation, population-wise, Georgia still has the lowest unemployment. Kemp's been a good governor, objectively so. When you ask people what he's done wrong, well, you'll get some of the gun rights supporters saying, well, he hasn't gotten the legislature to pass constitutional carry. I would love constitutional carry as well. And I wish Governor Kemp would push constitutional carry. That is, you should not have to have a state concealed carry permit to carry your gun. The problem is that Brian Kemp is not a king. He's a governor. And the legislature has to pass it. And all these people who are complaining about Brian Kemp haven't done a very good job of replacing the Republicans who are opposed. Kemp would sign the law, but the Speaker of the House of Representatives blocks it. So good luck with that. Republicans nationwide are going to have to figure this thing out. Do you want to nurse a former losing president's grievances, or do you want to move forward into 2022? You have the opportunity to win. You know, there's a story out today in Politico that the Democrats are hoping that the Republicans cost themselves victory. And they're pointing to Georgia and seeing what David Perdue is doing in Georgia. That if the Democrats can encourage this nationwide, they can win by having the Republicans divide and fracture themselves. This also shows you, by the way, the terrible leadership at the party level in the state of Georgia that this is happening. But it's no surprise there. They've become emotionally invested themselves in Stop the Steal. They're reaping what they sow now. But one of the other problems here, ultimately, is this. Republicans need to stand for something, or at least stand against Biden for 2022. They can't stand for relitigating 2020 because however much of an irregularity there was in the election, it wasn't stolen. They haven't been able to prove it was stolen. And they can't linger on the past. They've got to map a road ahead. And that road ahead does not run through 2020. You can't go backwards in time. Now, ultimately, there's this. The Democrats last week got Stacey Abrams to announce. It was a rather odd thing to do. It came the day after a mayoral election in Atlanta, Georgia. And Abrams stepped on the toes of the new mayor of Atlanta, overshadowed him, took him off the front pages. A lot of Democrats were aggrieved, and behind the scenes, the Democrats were whispering. They knew by Abrams announcing she could push David Perdue to go on out there and announce now. And do it before the legislative session begins in Georgia in January. So that the Republicans fight themselves and they don't have a unified legislative session. In other words, Stacey Abrams baited David Perdue and the Trump supporters, and they took the bait. If she can play them like this in December of 2021, imagine what she could do to them in November of 2022. We're talking about a candidate who could not beat a guy who dresses up in Star Wars costumes, and he thinks he can beat Stacey Abrams. Good luck with that.